X-Men the movie is rumored to be in development for a future Avengers title post Secret Wars and post the launch of X-Men. So getting this done ready early, getting kind of setting the seeds, setting the stage down the road would be awesome. I think, Mike. What do you think about that title alone? Before we get into the comic book version, if we just had an Avengers versus X-Men movie, is that something that's going to get your juices flowing?
Yeah, I mean, AVX is one of the kind of last big comic book events that I read. I've really kind of dropped off of like these big like summer moments that they have for comics in a while, but that one relies on a lot of history, right? The X-Men are a pre-established superhero team. You have the Avengers as well. They seem like two like opposing forces that could be entertaining to watch, right? The comic was interesting as well. I mean, I don't know if they're going to like bring the Phoenix Saga back once again, something that was really been beating audiences over the head with this Phoenix idea.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I read, when this rumor was dropping, I was reading through the articles, the comments. Everyone's like, we don't need another Dark Phoenix Saga. To hell with that. However, the idea of the Phoenix Five, right, the 5 X-Men people being powered with Phoenix-like powers and having to not necessarily off each other but beat each other to gain the full power, like a Highlander, is kind of an interesting idea at the end of the day, rather than just like, oh, Jean Grey's got the Phoenix powers again. What do we do with that kind of deal?
I mean, the best part about it, because there's no way when this movie comes out, and I think it will at some point in time, because talk about like talk about a tentpole title movie there, Avengers vs. X-Men. That's going to be amazing whenever they end up doing that, right? It's going to be compared to Civil War because it's going to be the most logical comparison out there. And the great thing about Civil War is like nobody was like body snatched, really. No one is like being manipulated by an external force and like, oh, we just got to hit them on the head with a frying pan and they'll be like back to normal, none of that silliness. So it's just two opposing ideals in like Earth of how to deal with like superpowered people, and it made the story really compelling. So they'll need to find a way to do that or be better than that when you're kind of remaking the movie kind of in a way with X-Men and Avengers instead of splitting the Avengers in half. And on top of that, I mean, when this movie comes out means everything, right? I would think in my head like, oh, I don't want to see Avengers vs. X-Men until the X-Men are properly rebooted. We have like a new, fresh team that has been around for a while. They've had maybe their own trilogy of movies. Then it makes sense to have them fight the Avengers. But also at the same time, like by the time that happens, our old kind of classic Avengers that we know and love on the big screen, they'll all be retired. So it's kind of like if you force it to happen too soon, that might not earn the story as much, but you'll get to take advantage of seeing like Chris Hemsworth as Thor in it, right? But if you wait too long, you just have to hope that all of the moves and pivots and recasts that you've done in this new world, people like it.
I'm going to disagree on the length of time. I think you give them 2 movies. Similar to how again Captain America, we had 2 Avengers movies and then we had Civil War, which is Avengers 2.5, right, at the end of the day, that fraction that led into the events of Infinity War and Endgame. So I think you can do 2 X-Men movies, do an Avengers versus X-Men, and then how the third X-Men movie is the fallout of AVX, right? How do the mutants and the X-Men team deal with the fallout of AVX? And that's their trilogy at the end of the day. So you don't have to, I think there's a middle ground that you can do for those story arcs to not have to do both without not to do all 3 and then wait forever, but you have a kind of a short run with 2 movies, and then the third movie kind of deals with the fallout, so it builds the character story at the end of the day. I think the AVX storyline will be ignored primarily. I don't think we're going to get AVX. The comic book relies on, like you mentioned, decades worth of knowledge of comic books. The Phoenix Saga, the Avengers, including the Fantastic Four, dealing with breaking the Phoenix Force into 5 fragments. The 5 people who get the powers are Cyclops, Colossus, Magic, Namor, and was it Emma Frost at the end of the day? So to build up 5 Omega level mutants is going to be pretty hard. So I think we whatever we do, it's gonna probably be, as you mentioned, very very much similar to Civil War, an ideal, right? The Avengers are doing good for good's sake. The X-Men are doing good, but they're still outcasts. They're they're not the same. They're trying to save mutants along the way. Which we'll see how that happens. But to me, to agree with what you said, when this comes out, this will be a huge movie, and it probably needs to fire on all cylinders, right? Like, I take a 4.5 out of 5 movie on this with just the title alone to hit that. We don't want to kind of drop the ball. Like, we did one X-Men movie, and now we're doing AVX. So, knock on wood for that success. But I'm thinking 2030, 2031. That sounds like a long way away, but that's only 7 years now. If you think about it, we're farther along than I'd like to admit. Sometimes. But what we needed the X-Men. We can't have AVX without the X-Men movies, and